Ojibwe maganatuk nagakwit kitimagas. Bine sikwe to go makwa indo deum. Kawababani kagish kaniganing and dunjabamigwich. That's Ojibwe, as you may have gathered. And I'm greeting you and thanking you very much for the honor of being here with you. And telling you where I'm from, which is the White Earth Reservation. You all know where Minnesota is that right? Very good. In northwestern Minnesota, kind of between Fargo and Bemidji. Does this mean anything? No, not really, but a little bit. Okay, well, the north. 7 Ojibwe reservations in northern Minnesota, because I know that you're probably a little challenged with this kind of information. There's about 550 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Do you know this? Some of you, not really. 19 Ojibwe reservations and about 100 in Canada. We're about the 2nd or 3rd largest Native community in North America. There's about 250,000 of us. And I live on my reservation, the White Earth Reservation, and I'm Bear Clan. And that's what I was telling you, but thank you again for the honor of being here. So as I reflected on how to prepare my remarks and to tell you, I was quite interested when I came down here in the difference between where I live and where you live. But where I live, this is called Menominee-Geesis, which is the wild rice-making moon. We have a set of moons. It is Watabaga-Geesis is coming next, which is the leaf-changing color moon. Do you have that here? No, you do not have any leaf-changing colors. Then we have Gashkadno-Geesis, the freezing-up moon, and you don't have that either. We have a set of moons that are like that's the Nemebene-Geesis, Anabana-Geesis, my personal favorite, because I like how it sounds. Isn't that kind of nice? Anabana-Geesis means the hard-crusted snow moon. It's in March. It's when you have a freeze and a thaw. You know what I mean? Kind of, not really, but yes, the idea. It's when you don't want to do a face plant in the snow. It'll be very painful. So that is, but I'm telling you that because that is reflective of a way of life which is based on a cyclical relationship to the earth. It's based on a, there are no Roman emperors in any of our calendar. We don't have anybody named, any of our months named after anybody from Rome. Everything is from this land, Oma'a King, this land here, or as we call it, Mikanaka King, the Great Turtle Island. That's what we call this here for our Mama'a King here. So as I reflected on talking to you about the issues of climate change and Indigenous people, I thought I might best speak a little bit about Indigenous thinking and sustainability because it is foundational to the discussion on climate change. And I think that most of you know, and we could have a larger discussion afterwards, but climate change is a symptom of a larger set of problems. It is not a unique occurrence that has just happened upon us now. It is a set of decisions that we have made as societies. It's not Darwin, the survival of the fittest. It's a set of social, political, and economic decisions that we have made to consume so much of the world's hydrocarbons that has created the situation we are in now in terms of climate change. But it is also, in my perception, and I think the perception of many other peoples, it is reflective of a worldview which many would argue is largely unsustainable. So let me talk to you a little bit about the ideas of sustainability from an Indigenous vantage point, and say that I want to recognize that which you know, which is that everybody is indigenous to some place. At some point, you had ancestors that lived in the place where they came from. And everybody on a worldwide scale is indigenous to some place. It just happens that most Americans are settlers on this land, and we live in a society which is not based on a set of indigenous relations to land. And we have developed a paradigm in many ways which is reflective of that. But I say that, and I'm not trying to impart either guilt or some kind of anger. I'm just trying to say this is a social construct that I think is worth thinking about if we want to think about what we're going to do to survive. And so that's what I'm going to try to present to you, is this Indigenous thinking. We have some teachings in my community, Anishinaabe community, and I don't know all things about all Indigenous people. I should issue that as a disclaimer. Sometimes people say, what do the Native Americans think about that? And I'll be like, what are the white people thinking today? I mean, it's an impossible, what I'm saying is that there's no such thing as one, but in general, there's a set of teachings that are in most Indigenous communities, and in mine, we have Gitche Debwewin, which means the great law, or the Creator's law. We have a set of teachings that say that we are all accountable to the Creator's law, that is higher than the laws made by nations, states, or municipalities. And one would do well to create societies which live in accordance to the Creator's law. What are some elements of those laws? We have a teaching that says Nindawe Muganatuk, which means we are all related. Even least charismatic megafauna. In our teachings, we are saved from the Great Flood, which is one of our teachings that many other people have as well in our history. The Great Flood, we are saved by the muskrat. That is who saved us, which is not a particularly charismatic megafauna. But that is who saved us, and so we are indebted as Anishinaabe people to something as small and kind of puny as that. And so we have a set of teachings which are reaffirmed in our relations and in our ceremonial practice of a recognition of our relatives, whether they have wings or fins or feet or paws, that we are related to them. We have a set of teachings that say that we live in a cycle, and that cycle is reaffirmed in a way of life, Minopamata Siwam. That cycle is reflected, as I told you, just in our calendar itself, a calendar that reaffirms relationship to land and reaffirms relationship to that which occurs, Oma King, on the land upon which we live. It is a relationship that recognizes that each spring, come the middle of March, although a little dodgy with climate change, you will get a maple syrup harvest. And so you had better be ready, and you better be prepared to go and get that maple syrup, because a great gift was given to us as Anishinaabe people, that is that sugar comes from trees. And we have another great gift, which is rice grows, our food grows on water, which is our wild rice. And so one would better be prepared to receive those great gifts given to us. And we have a teaching that says, it's called reciprocity in anthropologist terms. I'm kind of a mix. I've spent a lot of time in educational institutions, so I kind of, the reciprocity is what anthropologists quite often call it, but the idea that when you take something from the natural world, you always give thanks. And you take only what you need and you leave the rest. Because to violate, to be greedy, or to violate a covenant or an agreement with the creation, and to be disrespectfful and to be greedy means that you're not going to be necessarily able to return to that place and harvest, whether it is to harvest, whether mushrooms or, we pick everything up there. If you take too much, you might not be able to continue to come back. So does this covenant. So I'm telling you these teachings. These are 4 essential teachings that I have found that I think are essential to planning for sustainability. And I'm telling you them because I actually think that they have some value in this millennium. I'm not telling you because I want to impart a lot of Ojibwe culture to you, but that happens to be what I know perhaps pretty well. But because I actually think they have some value in their adaptation, in the thinking about how we are going to get through this period that we are in now on climate change. Those teachings I passed on to you in terms of our teachings, that's not the teachings we have in this society, pretty much. We don't believe that natural law is the highest law. We believe that man's laws are higher than nature's laws. So we over-allocate water rights in Western water basins. I was just out in Phoenix and I saw yet one more over-allocation of a water resource. The Colorado River doesn't even get down to the ocean anymore. It's so over-allocated, in that whole region. We allocate pollution credits. We say how much you can pollute, and we let them trade them. On world carbon markets, I haven't yet been to the climate carbon exchange in Chicago. I'm wondering what that looks like, but that's what we do. We change allowable limits, and we totally, we change allowable limits according to who's in office. Largely. It becomes a political set of issues of who gets to figure out, what pollutants you got. And you guys have got plenty of jet fluid, I guess, in your groundwater down here and plenty of it in your breast milk. And so we got, as a consequence of that, we have 100,000 chemicals in the environment today with pretty much no idea of the combined impact of those on our bodies. We believe that we are somehow different from the rest of our relatives and somehow higher up than them. But yet, on some level at a certain point, when you got frogs with extra limbs or really strange body parts coming out of Minnesota, you got to wonder what's going on in the water. Or exactly how many fungicides and how much atrazine is you're intaking. And they maybe look a lot different than you because they're frogs, but at some point I know that I happen to live right next to those same potato fields. And so what is going on in those fields may be affecting my children. You know, and that's this whole question of this separation and somehow this perception as, because we are so anthropocentric, our perception that we are somehow so different and so superior for the rest of creation, and you know, we are not. But the reality is, you know, we are in the end human, and we will have the same effect at some point. And so the extinction of one species after another, you know, may be intellectualized for some as something that happens to other species. But in the end, you know, there's a set of choices that are made that cause those extinctions. Those aren't Darwin, you know, that causes these extinctions. Those are choices that we have made as societies to consume vast amounts of world resources. Instead of perceiving that we have a cyclical economy or a cyclical way of life, we live in a pretty much linear economic system and a linear social system. We live in a society, the United States was based on the idea of the West, you know, the idea that you could continue consuming, you could continue expanding. The United States was predicated on the idea of a frontier mentality, that there's always someplace else to go. The grass would be greener. You could go west, young man, you know, or go west and forge new places. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we've kind of run out of places to go. You know, there's, you know, you got space, and I see a few millionaires heading up there, and I'm like, go ahead. You know, stay as long as you like. We can manage your assets down here if you like, you know, while you're up there in space. But, you know, it's at a certain point we have to realize that the West is a state of mind. That the idea that the frontier is also a state of mind. That there is actually the perception that you can keep moving in a linear manner is a result of a cultural set of, you know, an inherited and also a social set of behavior that has to do with being a transient society. But in the end, you know, what we have created in terms of, if you just look at our economy, my community traditionally has a pretty cyclical economy, you know, a pretty cyclical way of life that is related to that land and is related to a pretty close set of relations with that land. And our economy is not that. What are two of the biggest growth industries in the United States right now? Waste and prisons. Waste management and prisons, you know? Want a good job, go into one of those industries. And that is the result of a linear economy, is what it is. The idea that the average American, 1 million pounds of waste created per person per year, not including a lot of other things that are not in that equation, but 1 million pounds of waste created per person per year in the United States. 50 trillion pounds, excluding wastewater, is what we're looking at in the American economy. And what do we, you know, at a certain point you have to ask this question of, when they say throw it away, we're going to throw it away. This is what I ask my children. I've raised 5 children. And you can imagine what kind of a mother I am. So, you know, they say, I'm going to throw it away. And I say, so where is away? You know, where is away when you say throw it away? Is that the landfill, you know, on the backside over here? Is that an incinerator? Or is that like a third world country? Or where is away when we say we're going to throw it away? You know, where do we throw it away? That is, you know, why the waste industry is such a huge industry in this country, is because the away is so huge. The other thing that we are so good at producing is the social waste, prisons, you know, the human byproducts. The prison industrial complex in this country, and in a state like Florida, is pretty much thriving, you know, from what I can ascertain. And it's something we don't talk about because it's a social taboo. But on a worldwide scale, 9 million prisoners. 9 million prisoners is what they're saying on a worldwide scale, and 2.1 million of those prisoners are in the United States. We have the largest prison population per capita of anybody in the world, and we are supposedly the most highly evolved country in the world. We have, you know, 1 out of 4 point, what is it, you know, so 9 million and 1 out of 4.5 prisoners in the world are from here. 1 out of a quarter, 1 of 4, between 1 out of 4 and 1 out of 5 prisoners in the world are here. Now, in my idea of what is a sustainable society, it would not be in having a prison economy as being a centerpiece of an economic development strategy. You know, that would not be my plan. And I think that is one of the questions that we have to look at. is what it is we are doing and how it is we create that as an economy, and you know, what our plan is to create an economy that is not based on the creation of waste. So having said that, you know, what I would say is that we are faced with this challenge, which is this larger challenge, that we have a society which is based on conquest, which is based on empire, which is based on consuming 1/3 of the world's resources and having the largest energy economy in the world and producing more hydrocarbons and CO2 than anybody else in the world. And I would suggest to you that it may be a painful thought, but actually conquest and empire are not sustainable. At some point, you have to figure out how to build a society which is based on living where you are, on having a set of relations which are respectful and just to the natural world, as well as to the human world. And that only in that process can we come to terms with sustainability. Now, having said that, you know, we end up back where we started. Natural law is the highest law, higher than the laws made by nation states or municipalities. And so you look at whatever issue you look at, you know, I kind of leave that as my overall, you know, piece of analysis. And, you know, coming from the Southwest to here, you take an issue like water, on an issue like water. Happens to be we need it. They aren't making any new water. I don't know if anybody has noticed this. The same water today as when the dinosaurs were around, although I was corrected by a friend of mine who said that they are making new water, they are melting the polar ice caps. You know, but that is actually not the way we want to make new water. That is like not a good plan for the making of new water. But in that, you know, right now 1.7 billion people in the world are water challenged, and that's going to go to 2.5 billion in the next 15 years. 1 out of 7 of those people is in Europe. They aren't all in Africa, they are in Europe as well. And we are going to face a situation in Florida and in other states where that is exactly the case. Because right now, Ulysses, Kansas, just spent had to import 190,000 gallons of water this summer. Lubbock, Texas, is looking at $100 million for water purchases over the next 40 years, $100 million bucks. So you let me know how much jet lighter fluid or jet fluid you want in your water system, how much, you know, whatever else it is that you end up with in your water system, and where you're going to get your water. Because it turns out that in the end, you know, we are accountable to natural law. And we're all going to have to figure out how to live within our means because there's not anything new coming. You know, this is what we have. So having said that, we are faced with the choices, with the consequences of the choices we have already made. We made a set of decisions to move to a heavily fossil fuel economy, and we are now dealing with the consequences of having basically combusted ourselves to the edge of oblivion. That's what we've done. You know, I had to impart to my son, who is just trying to receive his driver's license. I have a 16-year-old son. I said, I'm really sorry, honey, but I participated in consuming half of the world's known oil resources before you could drive, you know, which is what we just did. We consumed half of the world's known oil resources, and we've we've created enough CO2 to pretty much combust ourselves, you know, a third, increase the amount of CO2 in the environment. And the implications, you know, I don't think you need a lecture on the implications of climate change and what we already have. I remember a couple years ago we lost count. Didn't we go all the way through the alphabet on the storms down here? Then they had to start back over again. Yeah, and I don't know why they're all named after women, but I guess they've kind of moved that around a little bit, you know. I don't know. And in our area, we got the Dakotas have an 8-year drought. And the recharge in the Rockies is not filling the dams that they put on the Missouri River, which was a bad plan anyway. And so they're at about 30 to 40% capacity. The whole WAPA system of power production off the great dams on the Missouri River. And they don't even have a plan on that one. You got everything from the melting of the polar ice caps to the fact that the climate destabilization is causing the creation of new, you got all the beetles that are eating the forest up in, because they had a double clutch of beetles up in Alaska. You know a lot of this. This is required, right? Is this part of your new requirement is to study climate change and going to school here, right? We're working on it. Good. We'll keep working on it. It's a good thing. Okay. The responses in general by the federal government have not been what I would have hoped for, but that would not be surprising. You know, the responses in general from the federal government are, by and large, the solution is clean coal and new nuclear power. And that have been the two approaches. So we have 12 nuclear reactors after 30 years of a hiatus of nuclear power. 12 nuclear reactors are on the books coming, that they're trying to license, and another 15 more are expected in the next couple of years. Florida Power and Light, I'm sure, is probably right in there. Followed by the idea of clean coal, which is an oxymoron. I don't know actually if anybody has mentioned this, but you can't actually have clean coal. You could try to say that you're going to sequester all the carbon out of it, but someone had to cut off the top of a mountain to get the coal. Which would make it not that clean to start with. And in our area, 4 of the 10 largest coal strip mines in the country are on Indian reservations. I'm not a big proponent of any more large mines on my reservations, and 70% of the world's uranium supply would be in indigenous territories. A good chunk of it in Australia, on Aboriginal lands in Australia, a large portion up in Canada, on Diné lands and Ojibwe lands and Cree lands up there, and then a good portion down in the southwest on the Navajo reservation, which passed a moratorium on uranium mining and is battling companies that are trying to come in and open mines that 30 years ago I fought. I spent most of my adult life fighting bad mining companies and bad dam projects. And I just feel like that the idea that somebody would say nuclear power is the answer, I just want to know, what was the question? If nuclear power is the answer. Was the question, do we want to cause more irradiation? Do we want to release more toxins into the environment? Do we want to, concentrate more power in the hands of people that we aren't sure who's going to get it? Do we want to worry about how many Soviet spies over in England are going to get knocked off by some unknown radiation? I mean, the more you bring out, the more you produce, the more problems you're going to have. So, that set of responses has been a bad set of responses. The second challenge that we face that is related to that are the challenges around food systems. And I don't know if you guys have studied this at all, but this is the area that I'm working on. And so say 10,000 years, we do pretty good in the food systems. That is to say that they're largely cyclical, pretty close to the earth. You have a crop rotation, green manure, and draft animals. About 80, 90 years, you start messing it up. I don't know how to put it, but you increase your food production by tilling a bunch of land that shouldn't have been tilled. And then you have the Green Revolution, which gives us a 7-fold increase in food. But how did they do that? They didn't do that by spinning flax into gold. They did that by adding massive amounts of petrochemicals, and massive amounts of fossil fuels in an energy system into the food system. And so the consequences are you got a 7-fold increase, but you used all of these pesticides and all of this farm equipment and fossil fuels to get it. So now we are at the point where it takes 10 to 15 calories of fossil fuel energy to produce 1 calorie of food. Right? Do you guys all get that? 10 to 15 calories of fossil fuel energy to produce 1 calorie of food. And we are at the saturation point with our fossil fuel food economy. That is to say that we put so much on, including down here in Florida, that now they have to put more and more on to get yields out. And we spend 10% of our fossil fuel that we spend on food, we spend 10% of that trying to mitigate the crop erosion and the damages that we already caused, right? That is the mark of an unsustainable food economy. So the intersection between peak oil, which is what we are looking at right now, where we consumed half of the world's known oil resources. The remaining are stuck at a crack in the bottom of the sea in China, some tar sands up in Alberta, down there in Venezuela, or who knows where they are. The intersection of those two means that we are in a position where we have some choices to make. Now, in our teachings as Anishinaabe people, we have this teaching that says, that refers to this time as the time of the 7th fire. That is to say that our prophets, who came a long time ago to us, our prophets talked about all the things that were going to happen to us, and I'm not going to go through all that. But what I will say is that they talk about this time when our people would remember who we were. We would go back and we would get our things that were are put away or taken by museums and anthropologists, and we would repatriate them. We would remember our songs, we would remember our food, and then our people would arrive in this time. They call us the Ashki Anishinaabe. And in this time, they say that we would come to a fork in the road, and there are 2 paths in that fork. And one path, they said, is well-worn, but it is scorched. And the other path, they say, it is not well-worn, and it is green. And it will be our choice upon which path to embark. And that's what they said. Those folks a really, 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 really long time ago, like a couple thousand, 3,000, I don't know, kind of inexact in my really long time ago thing. But that is to say, that's what they said. And I say that we are those people now. And I tell you that because I think that's where we are as America. We got two choices. Continue combusting, scorching, or move towards, what is the alternative. So I just returned from the big, the privilege that I have in my life, aside from the privilege of lecturing at college campuses, is that I work on my own reservation in northern Minnesota, and I look across and I see I see people that my ancestors were with, 200, 300, 500 years ago. I see their descendants and we look at each other. But I also have the privilege that I work nationally in Native American and Indigenous communities and some internationally. So I just returned from this solar energy conference in Phoenix that had to be like the smartest Native people I ever saw down there, talking about all these renewable energy technologies. I had a really big headache, let me tell you, by the time I left, because I was so many watts and photovoltaics and direct and AC and DC and, there's a lot of technology. But you have more brain cells than me, or I don't know if you have more than but you guys have a lot of brain cells in here. I heard there's 48,000 students here. Don't squander your brain cells. Don't do anything that's going to lose them. Don't do too many drugs. Keep those brain cells and use them, for something of consequence. And I'm saying, if you got the brain cells to think about any of these things or figure out how you can adapt your brain, this is it. Think of it this way: we are in the largest energy economy in the world. We are basically addicts. We could say whatever you want to, but you let me know if, I just raised, 4 teenagers and I have a 7-year-old. And I'm familiar with the habits of people like you. You feel, got to go plug in, right? Got to be plugged in. If you don't get your fix for your iPod or your laptop or your cell phone, you get really kind of, freaked out. And, that's America. We feel entitled to go over and plug in. And the problem with that, feeling entitled to always have power is that, it makes you at some point into some kind of a junkie. Because you feel like you got to have it. And the problem with junkies is that they do a lot of bad things and hang out with dealers, which is kind of, I think, part of what's happened to democracy. But having said that, the challenge is that if you want to look at the energy or the economy that we are looking at, I'm telling you that this is great potential for jobs, and it has great potential in Florida, which is a highly addicted state from what I can ascertain, to think of what some of these alternatives are. So I was, about a month ago, way to pick places to go. So why don't, in the middle of August, I go to the Skull Valley Go-Shoot Reservation in the middle of the desert in Utah? Well, Florida Power and Light and 11 other utilities were trying to dump some nuclear waste out there. I don't know if you heard this story. For about 10 years, this private fuel storage was trying to dump nuclear waste in this little tiny Indian community, about 150 people. And this community, they have like a dirt road. So I was trying to figure out who was in charge of the infrastructure for that nuclear waste and what the evacuation plan was. There's just a totally remote and politically disempowered community. And private fuel storage had 12 utilities trying to dump this nuclear waste out there in the middle of this Indian reservation. And those Skull Valley Go-Shoot people are very tough. They fought for 10 years. They fought the nuclear industry, on this. They fought them for 10 years. And last year in September, they got this ruling out of the Department of Interior that said that they couldn't dispose of the nuclear waste out there. That they was a violation of trust responsibility, kind of a technicality, but they got thrown out on a technicality. So I'm telling you this because if this little community of 150 people, can fight off nuclear waste from all these big utilities for 10 years, I feel like, grow up. We could all do something, That's what they did. And so I went out there to install a solar panel, and I'm telling you, it was hot. I mean, it's pretty hot here, but it was really hot, and I'm a northern Ojibwe person. I was trying to tough it, I was really trying to tough it. I toughed it pretty good. I didn't go out there at noon. I just thought I wasn't going to make it. I'll be in the morning and I'll be later in the day, but the noon sun. But, we put up a grid-tied solar, put up 2 systems. We put up one was a grid-tied solar photovoltaic unit to power their house, And this woman, Margene Bull Creek, led this opposition for 10 years. She's, about 65, 70 years old, and we figured she deserved a solar panel, for fighting off the bad guys for 10 years. So we put this one up on our house, and then we put up a solar heating unit, and you guys wouldn't need that. But, it's it sits on the side of the house, and you can make it out of beer cans. Geez, you guys could do that. Beer cans or pop cans, 87. We did one of those. You just cut them in half, paint them black, stick it in between this plexiglass. The aluminum conducts the heat. The heat, gets hot in there. When it turns to about 90 degrees, the thermostat cranks on a blower fan, and it blows hot air in the house. Basically, it's a solar heating system that sits on the side of the house with a plug-in. It's a really smart system, and it works really good out there because it gets cold air, but it's sunny, in the wintertime. Same thing as us. That's what we're doing up on our reservation. So I tell you this because I feel like, that's an example of what the next economy needs to look like. And the job returns for something like that, it's an entirely different equation. We're looking at in terms of capital investment versus labor. The capital investment into big coal, big nuclear is entirely different than the capital investment into these. And versus the labor investment. You got a lot of chances to do a lot of, labor and local installations. The other thing is that we are I'm going to Pine Ridge Reservation after this. I'm sure you guys have no idea where I'm talking about, right? You knew where Utah was, though, right? For that last room. So this is like 40 miles from Salt Lake City. And so now, tomorrow, I'm going to the Yankton Reservation, and then tonight I'll be at the Yankton Reservation, and then I'm going to drive across South Dakota to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, which is kind of the poster child of the poorest Indian reservation in the country. And, but did you know that only 2 presidents in history have ever gone to an Indian reservation? If you're going to do your cameo appearances in poverty zones, Bill Clinton was the second one. I think Coolidge was the first. Isn't that interesting? Going to pick where do you go get your cameos for poverty? He did his poverty tour and he went out to Pine Ridge. They set up a whole cell phone. They have they call them the Clinton cell phones. They still have these cell phones because they had to set up a whole Secret Service thing out there. So they have these leftover cell phones and this one frequency out there that everybody on the reservation has. Pretty cute, I like that. But anyway, I'm going out there because, it turns out these guys have 4,000 times more wind than they could use on their reservation. So I'm going out to put up a wind turbine. Now, I don't want to say that I myself am digging the hole. I usually do, I do a little bit of that, but I'm better at small units. I'm not the big unit girl, But we're going out there, we're doing the foundation this weekend, and in about 3 weeks, we're installing the tower. And we're going to power the largest Indian radio station in the country, which is in the middle of the Pine Ridge Reservation. And it's a 65 kilowatt, I don't know if it's a Mitsubishi, some kind of turbine, I forget what kind it is. But why am I telling you that? Because that is kind of indicative of Indian country. I don't know how this panned out, but Indian reservations, I don't know how this worked out. Indian reservations are the windiest place in the country. Go figure that. When we got done with all those treaties and all those Indian wars, that's what we ended up with was massive amounts of wind. So there's a reservation just north of there called Fort Berthold. Half those reservations are called Fort something too. Jeez, that's crazy. But that's where the Mandans, Hidatsas, and Arikaras live. It's up in North Dakota. And that is maybe the windiest reservation in the country. 17,000 times more wind power than they can use. Now, I am a rural development economist by training. That's what I was trained at Harvard and MIT, and spent some more years in the field. But the only reason I'm telling you that, it actually doesn't need a rural development economist to tell you that would be the mark of an export economy if you had 17,000 times more than you could use. So that's what I'm working on, and I'm working on it in big scale in Indian country and in smaller scale in Indian country. And they put the first wind turbine up on one reservation a couple of years ago. In 2003, the first wind turbine went up on the Rosebud Reservation, a 750 kilowatt turbine. They're looking at 10 megawatts now, and then they're looking at 30 on that reservation. At each of those reservations, the struggle that we have is the capitalizing of the wind industry on those reservations and the power purchase agreements. But Florida Power and Light puts up lots of wind turbines out in the Dakotas. That's what they do. And then they have the nukes down here, but Florida Power and Light is, I think, the largest of the wind purveyors of the private companies that are out there. But I was just doing an interview before this, and I was so intrigued by the fact that I'm driving on this northern Minnesota road, and the road is all blocked off. You know, these are small roads, not like your roads down here. It's two lanes and then just wide shoulders. And it's all blocked off. I have to park on the side and watch because this wind turbine, it was the tower, or the tubes, you know what I'm talking about. That's moving down the road, and they had blocked off all the lanes. And I'm looking at the side of it, and it says Tatanka, which, you know, if you saw Dances with Wolves, you know that means buffalo. And so they're going out to North Dakota, and so I stopped the guy and I said, so where's the turbine from? And they said, it's from Spain. And this is what I had to laugh about, because this is America. Like, we have the largest energy economy in the world, but, you know, the leaders are like Denmark and Spain in wind. And so Spain is putting up turbines over there in North Dakota because North Dakota still wants to burn dirt, lignite coal, you know, for as long as they have it. You know, they don't want to be radical and go to wind, although they have the best wind capacity of any state in the country. You know, so these questions of how you transform this economy so that you have these renewable energy portfolios that demand renewables and demand that we move to 20, 30, 40% renewables is what's going to drive this economy. And that, you know, is the kind of work that you all have cut out for you. In my own community, just to tell you a little bit about in closing, you know, as I said, I have the privilege of directing this organization, the White Earth Land Recovery Project. People say to me, I always laugh, people say, so what are you doing now? And I'm like, well, some people just have like a life work, you know? That's what I got, you know? And that's what I do. I've been doing it since before most of you were born. You know, I worked on my reservation since 1981. That would be before you were born, right? This is what I do. It's going to take the rest of my life to get this thing straightened out. Like this guy here in his Mikinak, his turtles. Takes a little while, you know? Nothing's going to change overnight, which is something you all have to remember. Change doesn't occur overnight, you know? And I know that sounds funny, but I know, because I've raised teenagers, how conditioned we are. You watch TV and it's like 48 minutes. You got a problem, little plot development, little character development, the problem's solved, right? You know, that's not life. It takes a long time. You got to hang in there. You got to be tenacious. You got to be tough. You know, Exxon makes a 50-year plan. Better have a 50-year plan yourself, you know, for your community. If you want to, it's either go big or go home. I am telling you, better have a 50-year plan for Orlando. You know, I don't actually see one. I just want to mention that. But, you know, that's what you need. So we are doing one on my reservation. I'm doing an energy plan for my tribe, and we just finished it last year. And our energy plan, you know, I looked at where the power was coming from, and we looked at our loads, and we hired a bunch of consultants, and we blew through them all. They all helped me a little bit, but at the end I just said, I'll do it my darn self. And so we took all this consultant data, and we, you know, ran a bunch of numbers, and we figured out how much we consume and where it came from. And so I presented it to my tribal government last year. And my tribal government is something like a state government. You know, I don't want to say it's a lot different in terms of the politics, you know, in some ways. And I presented it to my tribal government, and I said our Anishinaabe values, you know, which I was talking to you about, would say we would do the right thing with our energy plan. And, you know, some of them understood it, but some of them are not real Anishinaabe thinking. You know, they just don't really think like that. And so then I said, okay, how about this? Climate change is really bad. And I explained that to them, kind of, but they were thinking, oh, climate change seems like it's far away. You know how this goes. People think, oh, you know, I'm not sure if I see it, like, you know, it's not like garbage. I don't know what it looks like. You know, this is how it works with the psychology and the challenge of climate change issues, right? And it happens to other people. That's the other thing. It happens to people in the Pacific, or, you know, people elsewhere, people who can't get insurance in Florida. And then I said, well, how about this? How about this? How about we spend a quarter of our money on energy and we don't have any dinosaurs? And that they understood. That is to say that the United States spends 1/5 of its income on energy. That's what we spend. That's an average industrial economy in the world, 1/5. I don't know what you all spend, you know, but I don't know how many Priuses there are down here, and how many of you are riding bikes or, you know, hydrogen vehicles, but, you know, look like a commuter campus to me, you know. So on my reservation, we don't have a single Prius on the whole reservation. We don't. We have, you know, I mean, I'm the closest to the transformed energy economy. But everybody has pretty much older model cars and a lot of big pickups and a lot of four-wheel drives and, you know, nothing that is fuel efficient for sure, you know? So between transportation, town is far away. I tell my kids town is a 4-letter word. Every time they say, you know, they want something, I'm like, wait till tomorrow. 38 miles to town, right? It is a 4-letter word, you know? That's like 2 hours out of my day to go to town. Why would I go to town? You guys are thinking, man, these people are crazy out there. Why go to town? I live on a lake, you know, in the middle of the woods, and it's fall, you know, and I got a nice garden. Why would I want to go to town? Anyway, I'll let that go. But, you know, and then we have high heating bills. We have houses that are not energy efficient, right? And, you know, we have electric bills, whatever. So we figured out we spend a quarter of our money on energy. Equivalent of 8 megawatts of electrical power and a whole bunch of heat and gas. So I said, so how are we going to solve that? You know, on my reservation, what we decided to do is we started with conservation, and these utilities are required to spend a certain percentage of their money in my state, I don't know about here, on efficiency, but they spend most of their money talking about efficiency. So we went after them and said, you should, you know, what you should do is you should give us some of that money so that we can retrofit and do energy efficiency in the houses of our elders. That's what you should do. And, you know, because we're all low income on my reservation, but we should start with them. So that's how we started, and I'm pretty persuasive, but my nephew, who runs my energy program, is my adopted nephew. He's about 6'4", and he's even more persuasive. And so that's how we got that program started. And, you know, but they like it. It's a good, it's, you know, after there was a little bit of like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen if the Ojibways take over this program. We're like their flagship program now. I was like, this is like kissing babies, you guys. This is better than coal-fired power plants. You know, do this. And so then we started with that. And then I told you about those solar heating panels. We're putting those up on our houses up there. I'm putting another one up I'm picking one up in South Dakota. I have to drive a darn Tahoe rental car across the state. Isn't that shameful? Because my office is like, I said, because I'm going to drive back the solar panels. You know, so that's what I got to do, because I'm picking them up on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, because they make them up there. And then we do that, and then we looked at fuel, and we're in a different situation than you are, but I explained to my tribal government that wood was a good plan, because we actually have wood, and we don't actually have natural gas, or if you see what I'm saying. Because every bit of our money right now is going to off-reservation big energy corporation vendors. And wood is a local fuel economy, and the BTUs are pretty darn good for wood in northern Minnesota. Plus, if you don't need a shrink if you got a wood pile. I don't know how else to put that, but, you know, if I have a bad day at the office or a bad day in town, I come back and, you know, have a competition with my son on who can chop the most wood the fastest, and I feel a lot better. Don't need a shrink. And, you know, it's good for your health. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to live in this sedentary economy, which wasn't a very good plan. I don't know if anybody has noticed that. We're largely overweight and largely out of shape and largely not very healthy as a consequence of it. So chop some wood. I mean, you guys can't do that, but, you know. My pet peeve, which I don't want to lecture you, but since I have the microphone, you know, that's to say, like, my pet peeve is I go to the workout room over here at the Radisson this morning, very nice workout room, but every piece of equipment in there is electric, right? So what's the BTU calorie conversion of running on an electric piece of equipment, if you follow what I'm saying? So my thinking, you know, is of course we could just like power the room on the equipment. So it's getting dark, run faster. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you know, like, I don't know what your workout rooms are like here, but that whole equation baffles me of, you know, using energy to document that you're using energy. I don't know exactly what we're doing in that whole equation. That's a bad one. You know, so that's what I'm looking at, you know, is those kind of things. And, you know, my tribe has a little casino, nothing like any casinos down here, but I'm trying to impart to tribes my idea is those slot machines, have those be like this, you know, thing that powers the building. And then you could say it's, you know, it's getting dark, put in some more quarters, you know. That's my thinking on it, but that has not gone over too well. But I'm working on that one too. So that's what we're looking at in terms of heating. And then we are looking at renewables. And I will tell you something which may offend some of you, but the Venezuelan corporation Citgo, do you know who Citgo is? Citgo Petroleum, owned by PDVSA, I forget what the Venezuelan, fully owned by the Venezuelan government. So about 2 years ago, or whenever we had Hurricane Katrina, 21 senators wrote to the major oil companies, I don't know if any of you noticed this, and said, don't bilk us because your refineries are down, because we know you're going to bilk us in the winter. I don't know if any of you remember this, but they wrote to the major oil companies and said, cut us a break. And the only company which did it was Citgo. And so they started with this fuel assistance program in the Bronx and in Harlem and in Boston and in 4 Indian communities in Maine. And last year they did 263 Indian communities that they gave fuel assistance to. So my tribe, it was the equivalent of $500,000 worth of fuel assistance that came into my reservation to offset our heating bills in the winter. And we are the poorest county in the state of Minnesota, right? And we took a lot of political heat. Some people criticized us and called us unpatriotic for taking that fuel from the Venezuelans and from Citgo. But to be really honest with you, I find it rather ironic to call Indian people unpatriotic. Like, I'm not really clear on what else we're supposed to give to show how patriotic we are to the United States. I'm not really clear on that one. So anyway, we just said, we're taking this fuel assistance. But I told those guys from Citgo, I had some negotiations with them, and I said, this is a good thing what you're doing. This is very generous of you, but you know what? 3 years from now, the Indians are going to be cold again. What we need to do is think about the renewable, the conservation, and the post-petroleum economy. That's what I said. And so I'm working on a wind turbine on my reservation that we're looking at. Citgo is looking at the financing of this wind turbine on my reservation. And they're looking at another set of financing of this renewables in Indian country. And we're going to see how it pans out. But I'm pretty optimistic about it. So I'm telling you that, and I'm not trying to give a plug for that, but I am saying I didn't see Exxon volunteering. I didn't see Exxon come in and say, we're going to help you put up a wind turbine, And I think it's important to, just look at that. So we're putting up a 250 kilowatt wind turbine, and my tribe is putting up a 1 megawatt. And our plan is to look at energy self-sufficiency and energy sovereignty for our tribe. And then we're looking at exporting. But my position is I don't want to export to a bunch of junkies. But to be honest about it, I'd rather export to someone who has an energy plan and a little bit of a conservation plan. Because I don't see the point in just producing energy so that we can fuel a set of inefficient habits. So how inefficient is it? They say that just in fossil fuel plants themselves today, 33% of the energy that is produced, 33% is energy and 66% is blown off as heat. Thermal pollution or heat. That's 66% of heat that is wasted, could be recaptured. A lot of countries recapture it. It is the equivalent to the amount of energy that is used by the second largest industrial economy in the world. The amount of energy we waste at our fossil fuel plants is the equivalent to the amount of energy used by the second largest industrial economy in the world, which would be Japan. So that's what I'm saying. You want to talk about how we're going to make change, you got to talk about efficiency. And that involves some choices, but that involves policy choices. The second element of that has to do with the food economy. My own reservation is similar. We're just launching our food economy study on my reservation. I anticipate we will find the same thing. And I don't think you need too much of a lecture on that, but what you should know is that which I know, basically. As I said, we spend a lot of fossil fuels and money on transporting food to consumers. It's a huge amount of a fossil fuel economy. It's a huge amount of contribution to global climate destabilization. And it is also, the average meal travels 1,556 miles. I tackled the school lunch program at my child's school, which is the Pine Point Elementary School on the White Earth Reservation. And I think we have the first farm-to-school program of any Indian reservation in the country. And basically I'm looking at 2 things: diabetes, 70% increase in childhood diabetes on my reservation, and ADHD, something that has become one of the alphabet soup issues that most people actually know what the acronym means, right? Right. And they're saying that both of those things are largely related to diet. That is not a surprise. Diabetes is largely related to our inability to process the highly processed sugars And ADHD, they are saying, is related largely to, in some cases, additives, but also to dyes. There's about 100 studies that indicate that those things cause ADHD. And so why would we want to give kids 2 meals a day full of those? So that's what we're tackling. And we'll see how it goes. I didn't have any weeping with the children yet at the school, but I have been working pretty hard on trying to eliminate both the processed sugars and the dyes in their food. And a local food economy with local farmers, and our own wild rice and corn and our other foods that were processed. But I'm interested in actually creating an economy on my own reservation that feeds us. And then what we have, and if you're ever interested in it, Native Harvest is our market. We have a lot of wild rice. We probably have 17,000 times more wild rice than we could eat, which is a good thing to have. You know, I have millions of pounds of wild rice for my reservation, millions of pounds. And I can actually only eat so much, it turns out. So we're thinking we could sell some of that, and it's a lot better than Uncle Ben's. Lake grows on a lake, hand harvested, 2 sticks in a canoe, wood parched. So why did I tell you my story? I told you my story because our theory is that if we could do it, anybody could do it. Technically, the poorest people in the state of Minnesota, everything you don't want to have, we have. Whether it's arrest rate 7 times that of non-Indians, or, you know, everybody is below the poverty level, or alcoholism or diabetes. We have everything you do not want to have. But yet we are a community that said we do not want someone else being in charge of our destiny. We want to talk about, you know, who's in charge. You know, we are largely an American society which has relinquished control to large corporations, and we've become a culture that believes we can buy our way of life at a mall. That's what we believe. And my community doesn't believe that. We actually believe that we can create a way of life that has some meaning, and that 50 years from now, we want to have a say what that looks like. And so we are the ones who decided to create an energy economy and a food economy which is based on our local, you know, way of life. And in the long term, you know, what I know is that our corn varieties that are really old, are not genetically engineered, and were not raised in the Green Revolution, are Bear Island flint corn. I myself got back this much from a seed bank. That's how much I started with. I have 7 acres right now, this Bear Island flint corn. And I'm intending to keep growing out my corn varieties. It has like 23 times the antioxidants of any commercial corn. Full of fiber. Those heirloom varieties, pre-genetic engineering, pre-seed selection, you know, a lot of that pre-industrialized, have the stuff you want. And that is, and the other thing about them is that if you want to talk about climate change and resilience, these micro varieties are going to have more shot than something that's called Roundup Ready as a 4-degree temperature change comes in. So that's what you want. So that's what we're looking at. You know, and I impart that to you because I actually believe that the solution is going to come from communities, and that actually that's where it should. You know, I don't believe that I want to relinquish control to anybody in Washington of my life. You know, I plan to take charge of trying to make a better place myself. And I'm looking out here, I want to thank you for your time, but I'm looking out here and you're a smart bunch. You got a chance to do something of consequence. As I said, don't squander it. You know, figure out what you can do that's not just about you, but it's about making something that is, you know, a good place for all of us. Because in the end, you know, no matter what color we are, how rich we are, how poor we are, you all got to drink the water. You're all going to have to breathe the air. And we're all, at some level, accountable to the Creator's law or natural's law. Miigwech, well, thank you for your time. I'll take a few questions, and then I must fly to South Dakota. Miigwech.